But underneath, the Japanese people.
Okay, it's working.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to the Lunch and Learn program this month. And pleasure to see so many people coming out despite the weather outside. Today we are very pleased to have as our lecturer Mr. Michael Tuckfeld. Mr. Tuckfeld is a political analyst, and he has been on radio and on television and is a speaker, lectures in many, many areas. He is known to some of our people as a tour guide to exotic places. So if any of you are planning a trip, you can get his number and you can be in touch with him and see what you can do. In any case, he has done research of the Shintos and Judaism. He found many, many similarities, parallelisms between the practices of the Shinto and the Jewish people, and so to discuss the possible relationship between them. Before I call on Mr. Tuckfeld, I don't want to forget to announce, to remind you that next week, I believe it's Wednesday night, we have Purim. You're going to be in shul for the Megillah, and the synagogue is sponsoring an evening, a meal, a Purim meal, and we ask you please to remember this and to put it on your calendar and to make arrangements to be there. I believe that the fee is $18 a person. It's a pleasure for me to call upon Mr. Tuckfeld.
Thank you. Toda rabba. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here again. I think I was here last year? Yes. Last year we talked about politics, about the elections, if you remember. The forthcoming elections, now we know we are behind them, but we're not going to talk politics, unless in the end, if you want to ask me a few questions, and we still will have time, it will be okay. Because this is my work, my daily work. This is my hobby. And it all began 2 years ago with my Japanese cousin. I have a Japanese cousin by marriage. Don't jump to conclusions. She, with her family, they visited us. They came for Rosh Hashanah. I'll end with her by the end of the. I'll come to by the end of my presentation. And we were talking about many, many things. She's Jewish. Her husband is Japanese. And her children are Jewish Japanese. And then she mentioned something about, you know, that in one of the in many shrines in Japan, they have so many Jewish traditions. And I thought, oh yes, of course I know the story, because we can find Jewish traditions when you go to the Amazonas, and when you go to South America, and you go to North America, to all over the globe. Wherever you go, over the universe, you can find Jewish traditions. But then she said, no, I think you better speak to someone. So I took advantage. Last year I had a tour to Japan. I led the tour to Japan. And I said I'm going to go a week ahead of the tour and to see what it is all about. Because I heard that somebody wrote books about it, and in Japan it's very common, very popular to relate Japanese with Judaism. You can find, as I say, you can find all over the world, you can find points, you can find similarities. Today I'm going to show you something that at the end you would say it's nothing, but you won't be able to ignore so many factors, so many segments that really exist between Shinto, the religion of Shinto, which is not Buddhism, it's different, I'll talk about it, and Judaism. So I call this presentation Kedat Moshe Shinto. And before I start, maybe I will show you something like part of a little of a clip that was made in Japan by an American.
Japan is a country of old and new. Outwardly, everything is moving fast, in a state of constant progress. But underneath, the Japanese people are deeply rooted in tradition. How did the Japanese people become so adept at innovation and technology? What keeps their ancient culture so alive? Would you be surprised to learn that Japanese culture and religion could have been deeply influenced by Jews from ancient Israel?
Okay, so I'll try to answer this question. I will start with a ceremony that was held for centuries in a shrine, in a Shinto shrine called Ontosai, Sua Taisha. And it goes like this. The people are around the shrine. They're bringing in a young boy tied to a piece of wood, like a log or a beam of wood. And they are bringing this boy to an altar, which is in the middle of the shrine. They are lying him and tie him to the altar. One of the priests takes a knife, a wooden knife, and comes over to the boy as if he's going to stab him, to slaughter him. Another priest comes running into the shrine and say, "Don't touch the boy." And they untie the boy, and they bring 75 deers and sacrifice the deers instead of the boy. This is the tradition that went in this shrine for centuries, hundreds of years, until 100 years ago. Then it stopped, and I'll tell you in a minute why it stopped. But this is how it went on. So this is an old picture that was taken like about 60, 70 years ago of the parade leading the boy into the shrine. And does it ring a bell of something that we know? Akedat Yitzchak, of course. This is like a copy of Akedat Yitzchak. And when was it held, this ceremony? The whole thing was held, you know, the Japanese, it's very also interesting, the Japanese calendar goes according to the moon. The ancient Japanese goes according to the moon, which is very similar to us as well. And every first day of the moon, they used to light up fires on the mountains in Japan. And Rosh Chodesh, exactly. And this was held in the month, close to the month of April. April, spring is close to Chag HaPesach. This is when the Akedah took place according to our tradition. And the most interesting thing is that if this is the shrine you see on top, this guy, I'm going to talk about him in a minute. He is pointing to the shrine which is down in the valley. You see, this is, wait a second, let me see if I can get it right. Oh yes, the first one. The shrine is in the valley. Right here. This is the shrine, yes. And now you see the mountain above. The mountain in Japanese, I'm giving you the Japanese name. Moriya. That's the name. You see it on the map. Moriya is the name of the mountain. So this is where they worship a god. You know, the Shinto, they have million gods, about 1 million gods. They are called kami. And they are worshipping in this mountain, they're worshiping a god named Moriya God. This guy is called Arimasa Kobo. He's a publisher. He has a a publishing house in Tokyo. It's called Remnant Publishing. And he took as a mission of life to investigate, really make a research on the connection between Judaism and the Shinto and the Japanese. And what he is telling me, and he gave me the tour of the place, and then they gave me all the documentation about it. He says that actually the Japanese are the descendants of the 10 lost tribes that went on exile. Now we know that we find the 10 lost tribes all over. We find them in India, we find them in, as I said, in South America, in Brazil, in the Amazonas, in the woods. But I don't know if there is any part of the world that we have so many symbols, so many signs of this connection. And also, when we look back and we take what's written in the Bible and the description of the exile 100 years before the destruction of the first temple, and the Babylonians, what they did to do on the destruction of the first temple in 586 BC, you find it not unlikely that this, what he describes, really happens. So he opened Sefer Melachim, the book of Kings, and he reads that in the 9th year of Hoshea, the king Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Shomron. You know, there was the kingdom of Judea and the kingdom of Shomron. We're talking about the exile of Shomron, which was 100 years before the exile of Yehuda that destroyed the second temple. We're talking about the exile of the other tribes, not the Judea, not Yehuda. So he captured Shomron, Vayagel et Israel, and he took them in exile, Ashura, to Assyria, and he settled them in places called Chalach, Vachavor, Nehar Guzan, Ve'arei Madai. Madai is also, you know, Parasu Madai, the kingdom of Achashverosh later. So this is the king. Now we see here like how do you call it? A frieze of it's from the British Museum, I think, of the king of Assyria, Tiglat-Pileser III. He conquered parts of Eretz Israel in the 8th century BC, 732-734 BC, and he exiled most of the inhabitants of the land of Israel. Har Chavor that he mentioned is in the north part of Mesopotamia and close to Nineveh, or the city of Nineveh. Actually, it's today's Iran, the territory of today's Iran. So they were brought, these Israelites were brought by the Assyrians to the border of Iran and Iraq. They were settled. And 100 years later, in 563 BCE, when Judea was captured and Nebuchadnezzar from Babylon, exiled the Jews from Judea, they were also brought to the same area. And according to scientists who really made research on what happened to the Jews afterwards, there are many, many signs, because they found so many traditions in all this area that gave us the impression that really they were settled in the whole area along this way. And many books and many movies and clips and our literature was written about what happened to the Jews. There was an Israeli rabbi called Arav Eliyahu Avichail. I don't know if you heard, he just passed away, I think 2 months ago or 3 months ago. And his son also. They visited all these places, and they took on themselves the mission to find out what happened to the Jews after they went on exile, after the destruction of the first temple. For example, they found the Jews in Cochin, India, and that held the Jewish tradition for centuries. And many of them really were brought to Israel. I'm not talking now, about 30, 40 years ago. They were brought to Israel and resettled in Israel. They had to go through conversion, and they are part. The Cochin Jews are now part of the Jewish people in Israel, the Kochinim. And you found traces of Jews all along. If I can show you the map of what happened in those times, you see the purple line here is the first of the Assyrian. They were brought the Jews to this area. This is Iraq, and Iran is here. This is Nineveh. And then on the second temple in the 6th century BC. And then, so you can find traces. It's called also the Silk Road. I'm sure you heard about the Silk Road. All the Silk Road came all the way from China through these deserts into Europe. So all along the Silk Road, you can find tribes, groups, families that kept keeping all kinds of Jewish traditions. According to Professor Avigdor Shachan, he wrote a book about what the whereabouts of the Jews after the exile. And he claims that they really, after the exile, they really wanted to go back to Eretz Israel. They want to go back to their homeland. And they tried to find all kinds of directions. Some of them, they couldn't turn back west, because all the nations on the way will not let them pass. So they tried to make bypasses, going to the north, going to the east, going to the south, all kinds of bypasses to come back to Eretz Israel, like Columbus. He tried to go to India, he ended up here in America. So the same way happened to them. They were trying to go back to Eretz Israel, and it's not unlikely that they hit Japan on the way and settled in Japan. And in every place like this, they assimilated with the local, they didn't know, they thought that this is a mistake. It's not a mistake. They didn't know. They stayed there and they assimilated with the local tribes, the local people. The Japanese, when you talk to a Japanese and you ask him, when was actually Japan founded? What is the beginning of the nation, the Japanese nation? They would tell you, we started about 600 years BC, or the 6th century BC, exactly the time of the exile of the people from Eretz Israel. This is parallel to what the Japanese believe to be their beginning, the first emperor and the creation of the nation, of the Japanese nation, about the same time. So when you look at the signs, for example, they say that not only traditions, if you take the Japanese letters, you find similarity to Hebrew letters. I mean, I took this picture on a street in Tokyo. It's not ancient Japanese, this is current Japanese. They use this, they have like about 100 not characters, but characters they have much more. The Japanese and Chinese, by the way, is the same. They have kinds of letters, about many kinds of letters. This is one of them. This is considered to be one of the ancient ones. I think you can read it in Hebrew. Matechet. You see, this is like a mem, a taf, chaf, mem, maniac. Like it's a maniac in Hebrew. No, this in Japanese you don't read it this way. In Japanese you read it from left to right. It's different. I don't know what it means. This is a shop. I think they what do they? This karaoke place. Karaoke place. But you see how the letters are so similar to Hebrew letters. And I took this picture just 4 months ago. Anyway, so my experience in this Sua Taisha, in this shrine, was really amazing. I mean, I was standing like this, saw all these things, and it was very, very fascinating. For example, when you enter the every shrine or every temple, temple is Buddhist, shrine is Japanese, is Shinto. and I will talk to you about the difference between them in a few minutes. But to enter, you see the Tori. I'll elaborate about the Tori. Tori is a gate. Tori is the gate. This is the Japanese gate. Whenever you see this kind of gate, you know this is an entrance to a Shinto shrine. The gate to the Shinto shrine. And then he explained to me, and he showed me exactly how all this ceremony with the boy, you remember, right? I started with the ceremony of the boy, like you said, Akedat Yitzchak, similar to Akedat Yitzchak, and the boy became then a saint, and he blesses all the village around him. He is like a holy person from now on, from this. And they said that after, and then when I described this ceremony, I said that when they released the boy from the altar, they brought 75 deer to sacrifice on the altar. And he said that in this shrine they had 75 kinds of different ceremonies of worshipping. 75. And I asked one of the Shinto priests, why 75? What's this number 75? And they said, no, it's only a tradition. Then I found out that Mr. Kobo told me, I think the number 75, because 75 is the number of the Bnei Israel that went to Egypt with Jacob. I said, no. What we know, it's not 75. It's 70. He said, yes, I know that the Hebrew tradition, it's 70. But then he said, you have to look at the Septuaginta. Septuaginta is the Greek translation that was written by Stephan. Stephan was one of Jesus' disciples. He was a disciple of Rabban Gamliel HaZaken. And at the beginning, in the beginning they're all Jewish. and he was one of the disciples of Rabban Gamliel HaZaken. And he was one of the writers that translated, Targum HaShiv'im. They translated the Bible into 70 languages. And he wrote the Greek translation. The Greek translation says, we say, B'shiv'im nefesh yardu avotei mitzrayim, 75. He said 75. And if you look at the Greek translation of the Bible, the official Greek translation, this is like a copy of the Septuaginta, it says 75. So most likely, the time we're talking about, the time where Jesus was walking around the place, and everybody spoke Greek at that time, and the Torah also was taught in Greek. So they knew that the number is 75 because this is what's written. And when they took this tradition with them to the east, to Japan, they stick to the number 75. And this is why they sacrificed 75 deer on the altar after this Akedat Yitzchak, so-called Akedat Yitzchak. And the Samaritans, until this very day, they say that they have the version of the Torah which was in the real version when Bnei Israel had at that time of Beit Rishon, the first temple. And they also, in their tradition, in their version of the Torah, it's also said that the number is 75. And this is why the Samaritans sacrificed 75 deer in their Chag HaPesach, in their Zevach HaShomronim, in Chag HaPesach. Anyway, this number 75 has a great significance in the Japanese tradition. Also, some of the shrines were kept. They really wanted to keep the shrines by families, and they chose 75 families to keep the shrines. Even in China, in the oldest community in China, in Kaifeng, also they had 75 families to keep the synagogue in Kaifeng. So 75 means something. But not only this, let's talk a little bit about the deer that was sacrificed. one of the deers, they have to have a split ear. This is the picture near this Suat Aisha shrine. There is a little museum. In the museum, they have all kinds of pictures and descriptions of all the ceremonies that were held in this shrine. So the deer, there's a picture of the deer, and the deer has a split ear. Why does it have a split ear? If you remember, the ram or the deer that were after the Akedat Yitzchak, Avraham saw the deer that his horns were caught in the bush. And he must have hurt his ear trying to be released from the bush. So he had a split ear. So far they had to choose to find every time a deer with a split ear to sacrifices, which is the most holy deer among all the other rams or deer. And the official name of the whole ceremony is Isakuchi. Isakuchi. Isakuchi, uchi, the suffix kuchi in Japanese means of. It's like a traditional or a very common suffix. Isak, that's the official Japanese name, Isakuchi. So this ceremony, actually, they held it for hundreds of years, and an ancient historian, Japanese historian or a scholar, he wrote every detail of this ceremony. And by the way, he told me, Kobot told me that in the years to come, they found it very, very difficult to find 75 deer and to find a deer with a split ear. It was very, very difficult. So they replaced them with pigs. They took pigs instead of deer. About 100 years ago, there was a new era in Japan that changed the whole nature of the society. It's called the Meiji era. I'm sure you heard about it. The Meiji era is a new emperor that was, he adopted many, I would say, values or principles from the West. One of them was like human rights or human rights and Tsar Balei Chaim also to treat the animals. So he stopped the whole thing. He said no more Isakuchi in the shrine with a boy or with a ram, but tradition is tradition, so you have to do something. So what do they do now? They give up everything except for one thing they bring and sacrifice it. It's the wooden beam. So you can see here pictures with the whole people, oilem, that's okay, there is a parade carrying the big beam, bring it to the shrine, and then they plant it. So just to put it in the middle and plant it in the ground. Instead of the boy, instead of the ram, this is what they do now. So this ceremony keeps on until this very day. These are current pictures. Unfortunately, I missed it. I came in May, not in April. But this is what they do every year. And now they call it, this beam, they call it Unya Basira, which is a sacrifice of a wooden beam. This is what they do. So is it a coincidence? Well, it's up to you to decide if it's a coincidence or something is really, there is something about it. I'm giving you just the facts, okay? You decide. Now, when you go into the shrine, you can see two statues of lions standing on both sides. The right lion has his mouth open as if he says, ah, and the left lion has his mouth closed as if he says, hmm. What is ah and what is So he explained to me that ah is the first pronunciation and you close it is the last one. So God dominates the world from the beginning until the last. So it's a symbol for God's domination over the world. And why a lion? And it's also very puzzling. You know why? Because in Japan, never been lion. Never. There are no lions in Japan. So why do they put lions? Because lions also is the symbol. Gur Aryeh Yehuda. It's a symbol that was brought from Israel, in a country that never saw lions before, in this part of the world. Who knows? By the way, in some places, instead of lions, in other shrines, you have unicorns. Like a legendary animal, the unicorn. And who is unicorn? Yosef. B'chor shoro hadar lo v'karnei re'em karnav. That's a symbol of a shore and the keren. So they say this is Joseph, actually, the unicorn. Anyway, but no lions in Japan. And then, next to the lions, you can see a place in which what do they do here? No, netilat yadayim. Netilat yadayim. They have tools and they wash their hands. Everyone who comes to the shrine is entitled to wash his hands the same, like this. Not with the tap. You don't open the tap and wash your hand. You take a tool, take the water, and you wash your hands. And also one thing next to it really reminds us of a shul, of a synagogue. There is a kupat tzedakah, a pushke on the side that you can put donations, really, in the entrance to the shrine to make a contribution to the temple. And now, after you pass this, and you see, we can see Kobo. This is my friend. Kobo is washing his hands because we're not allowed to go into the temple before we wash our hands. We don't have to say al netilat yadayim, of course. But then you're arriving in another place in which you see all kinds of like paper cuts, like a wall of paper cuts. In every shrine you can see it, like trees, and they hang the paper cuts. You say paper cuts, shreds. Yeah, it's okay. And what is this? Like a curtain. What is this? What does this curtain mean? It signifies a separation between the secular place and the holy place. Once you pass this wall of these paper cuts, you enter to the holy part of the shrine. And all these paper cuts that are written by people with all kinds of things that they ask from the gods. Bakashot, all kinds of requests and iron and blessings. What they ask, what they want, they don't put it in the kotel, they put it on these ropes and hang them by the entrance to the shrine. And these paper cuts wall or curtain is called shibanawa. Shibanawa. I don't know what the meaning of this name. And then you get to a place where you see trees. Let me see if you can see it in this picture. No, these are you see the trees with the old ancient steps going into the shrine, the holy part of the shrine. These trees are called in Japanese hashira. Hashira, they say it comes from the Hebrew word Asherah. Asherah, by us, Asherah is a tree that you worship, idol worshipping. It's idol worshipping, but for them, they're not Jewish. But the tradition, the names, for centuries, for hundreds of years, still remain the same words. So it's called Hashira. Also, they peel. You can see some of the trees. They peel the klipa, bark. Okay, and machsof alavan will be called. Also, you can find all kinds of tradition in the Bible, in our sources as well. I will not elaborate on this. Now, after you climb these steps, you arrive into the temple. And here comes the big surprise. When you measure the temple, one by one, exactly the measurements of the tabernacle that is described in Sefer Shmot. The Rochav, Ha'orech, they say it's, if we say that Amah is about 44 centimeters, something like this, you find the exact measurements of the tabernacle, of the Mishkan. HaMishkan. Mishkan Ha'edut. The same measurements, and you can see how it is divided. You can see that they have the holy place. This is the Shinto shrine. And this is Holy of the Holiest. This is the Tebisuya, Kiyor, where they wash the hands. And this is the Tori, the gate. And this is the altar. That's what makes the difference. But you can find the same measurement, the length, and the Rochav, or Rochav, the width. It's all the same measurements of the Mishkan, which is really amazing. It is made of cedar trees, very popular in Japan because they are very strong against all kinds of insects. So everything is made of cedar woods. And Kobo says that the same thing was the Mikdash Shlomo. When Shlomo HaMelech built his Mikdash, his temple, we can see exactly, and he built the walls of the house within, this is from Sefer Melachim, within boards of cedars from the floor of the house onto the joists of the ceiling. He covered them on the inside with wood, and he covered the floor of the house with boards of cypress. This is from Sefer Melachim. The same thing is really how the Shinto shrine is also built of these. You see, everything is done in wood, in cedar woods, which is very popular in Japan. And also the entrance is in the east side, the same, Mimizrach Shemesh Mevo'o, the sun shines. So this is how the shrine is built. Every shrine in Japan, every Shinto shrine in Japan has the same measurements, the same midot. No difference. If you go to the north of Japan, the south of Japan, all over, the same measurements of the building and the height and everything. Another thing that they carry with them. You see, these are pictures I took when I was in this shrine. You see one of the priests coming out of the Mishkan, and also what they do, they have kind of an ark. They're carrying the ark into the Holy of the Holiest. There's a whole ceremony, and I'll elaborate a little bit later. When we arrive in Gion in Kyoto, they have another ceremony that has to do with arks. What they do with arks, but this is a little bit later. And after they bring the sacrifices, they bring the ark, they pray. And to this Holy of the Holiest, the president, if you can say, the chief priest enters. How many times a year? Once. Of course. He enters only once a year to pray and to bring sacrifices into this place. On top, there is a big stone. And also another object that I will show you in a minute. But next to it, you can find this. These are barrels with sake. What is sake? Wine. Sake is wine. Wine made of rice wine. By us, in בית המקדש, כשבית המקדש היה קיים, we always took wine, לנסח yain on the altar. We also used wine. So here are the barrels of wine waiting to be spilled on the altar during the ceremonies. Excuse me 1 second, I need the... I know. Okay, thank you. Okay, so they use And he told me that also we sacrifice salt. Don't you do it don't you have in your tradition to sacrifice also salt? I said, yes, of course. Many of the korbanot, you put salt in them. It's written in the Torah that you use salt to make this together with the sacrifices. So then I asked him, okay, if you do everything that was done in Beit HaMikdash, why don't you sacrifice animals? In Beit HaMikdash, we sacrifice lamb and chicken and cows and ox and bulls. Why don't you sacrifice animals? He said, I don't know if it's really allowed. Why? Because he said that in Sefer Dvarim, before they enter Eretz Israel, Moshe warns the people, be careful not to sacrifice your burnt offering anywhere you please. You can do it only in Jerusalem. We are not in Jerusalem. We were in exile. So we're not allowed to sacrifice animals. That was his answer. Well, and then, in the end, there is another object, very interesting. I saw a big mirror. It's very simple. By the way, in Shinto, no statues, no psalim. How do you say? Statues. No. God, in the Shinto belief, is invisible. Not one God. I told you, there's a million. There are a million gods, million kami. But all of them are invisible. You don't see them. And this is why no statues. Now you can tell the difference when you go to Japan. You know, Japan has two religions. There's Shinto and Buddhism. And they keep changing. They keep moving from one to the other. They don't keep to the same religion. When they're young, they're Buddhist. When they're older, they become Shinto. They can go back. Doesn't matter. In a Buddhist temple, so many statues and gold and then figures and animals and all kinds of stuff. In the Shinto, no. Very empty. Almost nothing. So you see a big mirror. What is this mirror? I said, this is an object that it's in the shrine. Then I told him the midrash about Hamarot Hatzovot. We had it 2 weeks ago on our parasha. When they built the tabernacle, the Mishkan, the women brought the mirrors to Moshe Rabbeinu. And Moshe didn't want to accept them. Moshe Rabbeinu said, no, they are mirrors. What is their use? They're used for the women to beautify themselves. Beautify? Yes. To beautify themselves. It's not proper. It's not holy. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, this is the finest article that I want to be in Beit HaMikdash. Why? Because back in Egypt, when the men didn't want to have sex with their wives. They didn't want to have a relationship. And because of hard work, because they said, why should we have children? We don't need children to bring them into the hard labor and suffering. And the women took the mirrors, beautified themselves, brought them to the orchard where the men were working, and looked themselves and made them rise their passion, and they had children. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, this is why these Nashim Tzidkaniot, these women, this is how they maintain the nation. Without them, you wouldn't have Bnei Israel anymore. So this is the most favorite present that I like to be in Beit HaMikdash. Take the mirrors. And Moshe Rabbeinu took the mirrors and he made from them the sink in which Kohanim purify their hands and their feet before they begin to the work in Beit HaMikdash. So I told him, he said, yeah, I heard about it. This is the reason why we have mirrors in our shrines. It's very interesting. I find it very, very interesting. So I told you a little bit about the Shinto and Buddhism. I will not elaborate very much on this, but You know, the Japanese, they say they're born Shinto and they die Buddhist. They become Buddhist later. The Japanese take from both religions everything he wants. And you know, actually there was a big dispute between the Buddhist and the Shinto, because the Shinto is considered to be the religion of the emperors. And whoever is against the emperors, or whoever try to rebel or mutiny, uses also religion grounds, like today use religion grounds for any revolution. And this was also a massacre. I don't want to it's part of the Japanese history. You don't have time for all this. And I asked Kobo, why were you so interested? What made you so interested to go into this research and find the relationship between Judaism and Shinto? He said that in 1990 he found a research done by linguistic professor Joseph Heidelberg. He wrote a whole thing about, he published a lot of books and articles and scientific articles that all these traditions, Japanese traditions, are very similar to the Judaism. And he found more than 5,000 words. More than 5,000 words with a lot of similarities between the Japanese language and the Hebrew language. For example, he gave me, how do you say you in Japanese? Anta. Ata in Hebrew. Or the king, Hod Malchuto, Mikoto. Mikoto, Malchuto, Melech, Mikoto. And then we find the emperor is called Mikado. Mikado in Japanese. Mikado, like Migadol. You know, if you want, you have to use your imagination. And Nusi, president. Nasi, right, yes. And Tori, we talked about the Tori, about the gate, also has Hebrew sources. Tori in Aramaic, it's Tara, Taf Reish Aleph. So the word Tori is in Japanese, and you see here. This is a drawing of the when Shlomo HaMelech built the temple in Jerusalem, and he put these two columns, and he created the pillars at the portico of the temple. The pillar to the south he named Yachin, and the one on the north Boaz, Yachin veBoaz. Right. So if you go to as I showed you before, a Japanese story. You see? Two. This is a picture we saw before. Yachin veBoaz on both sides. Every Torah is in two pillars. Yes, sir.
Did you ever see a Shinto priest wave a lulav?
Yes. I'm coming to it. I'm getting to it. I'm getting to it. By the way, there was a rabbi here in America, Marvin Tokayer. You heard about him. And he also... he read the books, he searched, he said, wow, I opened my eyes, I couldn't believe. And Kobo said, yeah, then we began to publish all the things. He got a lot of information about it. So this is one of the nicest gates. It's like near Hiroshima in Japan, you know, Hiroshima. And when they arrive in the temple, they ring the bell. So why do they ring the bell? They say we ring the bell because we want to announce God that we are coming, that we are here. You remember the description of Kohen HaGadol, he had pa'amonim in his robe. He had bells. Why? To be heard. To be heard that he is coming. He's coming to do his work, to do his worship. By the way, if you ask the Shinto priests, if they took their basis from Judaism, they would say, no way. They get angry when they hear it. No, we have our religion of our own. We didn't take anything from anyone. We're not any connection with Judaism. But, and most of the priests, the Japanese priests, they learn in universities. You learn Shinto in universities. This is how you become a priest, and in colleges. And the religion came as a tradition from generation to generation. And he says, They don't know where it really comes from. But recently they found some proof, genetic proof. I'm not an expert. I didn't get very deep into it. As I told you, I'm a journalist. I'm just collecting facts. And he told me that in a research, they made DNA to the Japanese people, and they found that in 40% of the Japanese people, there is a genetic factor which is very similar to the Jewish genetic factor. Very similar, and he explained to me, it has to do with the genes and with the chromosomes. It's group D from chromosome Y, and this is the same. I know nothing about it. But there's a whole research about it, and he said this is a sign that 40% of the Japanese people, and Rav Avichail, when he visited Japan and he went from tribe to tribe, from city to from town to town, he found in south of Japan, Japanese, also Chinese tribes, that he declared they must be Jewish. They're 100% from Jewish origin, because this is a genetic factor that you don't find it in any other group of population, not in Korea, not in China, not in Philippines, never, in any other one. Only these 40% in Japan, you find this genetic factor. So most of the people of the Japanese, they don't know that they carry this burden of being Jewish on their shoulders. But one thing they have, which is great admiration to the Jewish nation. Not only them, this is very common in the East. When you go to Japan, you go to Vietnam, you go to China, all these Far East countries, you find amazing, so different from Europe, so different from other parts of the world. They admire Jews. They admire Israel. I was sitting there, it was like half a year after the last operation in Gaza. How do you call it? Tzukaitan. I forgot the English name. When we bombed Gaza and all the tunnels were discovered. And I was sitting with with the editor of the biggest news agencies in Tokyo. And we were talking, and then he began to say, I heard what you're doing in Gaza, and I prepared myself to like kind of a lecture. I heard what you do with Gaza, that you want to kill the terrorists, so you bomb the Gaza and you kill a lot of civilians. This is exactly what you should do. I admire, all the world should learn from you. This is what he told me. I was standing like this because I was prepared. You know, when I meet journalists from all over the world, I'm prepared to get punched for what we do in Gaza. And he says, yes, this is when terrorists do find shelter among civilians, this is how you fight them. So I said, you're absolutely right. I don't argue with you. Of course. So they say that the percentage of Nobel Prize winners among the Jewish nation is unproportional to any other nation in the world. So they admire it. And the Palestinians work very hard to change this in Japan and in China. No success. In Korea, they just opened a faculty for Talmud in the Seoul University. Seoul University Talmud. Hundreds of students want to learn Talmud because they say the Talmud, the Gemara, is the major factor that made the Jewish people so clever, so smart. So they want to learn. They want to be like Jews. So this is why you find. I didn't tell them they're wrong. Sometimes they let them believe that this is correct. But they really believe in it. They really believe in it. So there is a real admiration to the Jewish people. So tell a Japanese that you belong somehow to the Jewish nation, he will be very happy to hear it. Then he told me, okay, if you want to see more, you have to go to another shrine. Another shrine, it's called Ise Jingo. It's about 4 hours from Tokyo. And there he told me you have to meet a very nice priest. He is And this is the gate to the other shrine. His name is Hideo Hatakeda. He is Christian. So he was born as Shinto, but then he decided 20 years ago he arrived in New Zealand, and in New Zealand he decided to study Christianity and Buddhism, and then he became a Christian priest. So now he is Christian. And he said it's very hard. Schwer zu sein a Christian in Japan. It's very hard. So the temple that we visited, it is a very nice story. He gave me a tour, he walked with me, explained with me everything about this shrine. And he told me that this shrine was built actually as in honor a goddess name of Amaterasu, which is the glory of heaven. That's the meaning of the name. And she is the goddess of the sun, but she was hiding in a cave. When she was hiding in a cave, the whole world became dark. So one monk came over and he prayed by the entrance to the cave, and then she came out. And in honor, and she became then the goddess of the world that created the world, created the nation. So what was the prayer he's telling me? The prayer was actually in Japanese, but I believe he prayed in Hebrew. How is it Hebrew? So he said the numbers. And the numbers in Japan, now you have to excuse me, Japanese is not my first language. It's Haipu, Miyuitsu, Mu Nana Yakoko no Tobo. Does it sound Hebrew to you? Now you have to make your imagination functioning, because what he said, if you read it with one breath, like Heidelberg wrote, you find a sentence saying Hayafa mi yotzia mi naane yikachena tavo, which means this is the beautiful girl. Whoever takes her out, please take her out, and she will come. So from Haipu, Hayafa, Mi Yoitsu, Mi Yotzia, Mu Nana, Mi Naana, Yakokono Tovo, Yikachena Vetavo. Okay. Nagid. Yeah, you have to make a big kvetch to make it sound like Hebrew, but this is the tradition. And they say a very interesting thing. You see, he's telling me, you see this shrine. Also, when we enter this shrine, you have to wash your hands, of course, and you can't enter the shrine before you make netilat yadayim. And he also is telling me that in this shrine there is a part that every 20 years they demolish it and build a new one next to him. I said, why is that? He said, you're not the first one who asked this question, why we do this. I don't think there is really an explanation. But after a while he says, you know, what we believe is that the most important ritual in this shrine, then when we take an ark and make a parade and bring the ark into the shrine, we take it out, we go to the river, and then we put it on the river and float it on the river. Symbolizing that the ark is wandering from place to place. This is exactly what happened to the ark when Bnei Israel entered Eretz Israel with Yoshua. They crossed the Jordan, and then the ark wandered from place to place. Shiloh, I don't remember the other places, and then it ended up in Ir David. And he said that the longest time that the ark stayed in one place was 20 years. So this is why, he said, we might be the explanation why we demolished the shrine and built a new one every 20 years. The last one was built 2 years ago. This is one explanation. But this is the arks that you can see here. This is a ceremony that is taking place nowadays Again, this is today. You see all kinds of arks, not only one ark, and they bring it to the river, and they use this shrine for all kinds of ceremonies. They don't do bar mitzvah. That I made sure of it. They don't do bar mitzvah in this. And all the mountains and all the forest around, they have many animals. You have, and in the river you have big red carps, not for gefilte fish. And they carry it with 4 priests. They carry the ark to the river and put it. But now they cancel the whole ceremony because of pollution. They are afraid of pollution of the river. And then he told me, you remember in Sefer Shmuel, when David HaMelech brought the ark to Jerusalem, he was dancing in front of it. So all this ceremony is made with a lot of dancing around. And I remember as a kid, he told me, as a kid, we were all this dancing and they were given candies to the children. Even in the Sefer Shmuel, it is described how all the people got presents, ashishot, from the priests. And then I asked him, will the priest agree with all this? He said, no, they will not. But this is what we believe. Just you read the Bible and you find so many things that are so similar. I told you about the time, about the ceremonies, about all these details, about the measurements that we mentioned before. And then, when we walked on, I got the surprise of my life. And I'm going to show you the picture that I took, some of the pictures that I took. I took the picture of this priest in the yard of this. Look at his rope. Look what is hanging out of his rope. I said, what is this? This is the traditional cloth of the priest. You wouldn't believe what you see. Exactly. Only 2, not 4. They have only 2 hanging from the ropes. Is this the tradition? This is what they... Yes, absolutely. So then I found that Rabbi Tokayer in his books also wrote about the ropes that the Japanese, the Shinto priests are wearing, like the white clothes of the Kohen HaGadol, of the Kohanim in Beit HaMikdash, with the tzitzit. And many other symbols really remind the other clothes of the Kohanim. By the way, when I was there, I saw a group of they look businessmen and businesswomen to me, very dressed in suits and in everything. And this gate, and they opened the gate for them, like a group. They came into the shrine. You cannot enter. It's a holy place. You cannot. Unless you make reservations ahead. If you want to worship, they go inside. They don't enter because you're not allowed to enter the shrine itself. You stand in front and for 5 minutes, maybe they say something, they bow and they go out. And they look busy. They didn't look like religious people to me, but this is what the people do. This is what how they worship. In the shrine. And they also have, you see these hats that they have, mitznafot, on their head, and it's very, very interesting. This is the dual life that you have in Japan that was mentioned in the clip that I showed you in the beginning. It's a high-tech country, very well developed, very sophisticated on one hand, a high standard of living. You go when you go to the toilet, the first place you have to go when you go to Japan, go into a toilet. Because the toilet in Japan, you can adjust the warmth of the seat and the way you want to get cleaned afterwards. You press the buttons. If you want to hear music, you can pick up any kind of music you want to hear while you're there, and of course to dry up. And then there's a story about the Israeli ambassador. So it's a true story. The Israeli ambassador, the toilet seat in the embassy broke, so he called the technician to fix it. So they came 3 technicians with white robes, Japanese, and they went into the toilet and checked and came out with a diagnosis. Your seat is broken. Very well. So what do? we have to replace it. No problem. But he is Israeli, and he didn't want to make a big expense on my account, on the Israeli state of the account. I want a simple one. No music, no worm, no tchotchkes, nothing. A simple wooden seat. I said, okay. They came the next day, no, after a week, I'm sorry, with a seat, a simple seat with nothing. They put it on, and they gave him the bill, $1,500. What? This is what a simple seat costs in Japan. If you would ask for the music and that, it would cost you $20. But you ask for a simple one, until we find one, they are very rare in Japan. So he wanted to save money. So it's a high-tech country. All kinds of, every centimeter on the street you have a vending machine. You can buy anything you want. In the supermarkets, you don't know what you're buying because everything is in Japanese, but you like the colors. And you have everything there, very sophisticated. On the other hand, at the same time, Japan is a very traditional country of the pagodas, of the ancient tradition, of the samurai, and the music, and the ancient food, with the sushi and traditional dishes and everything. So it's very combined country, contradicting country. Very, very interesting. Then, if you go to the shop of the shrine, you can find this. This is a piece of cloth. How do you say cloth? Parchment. That they hang on the doors, on the side of the doors, like a mezuzah, with all blessing of good luck or fortune or whatever. They also put it, and they sell beads. The beads have the shape of the letter Yud in Hebrew. I could have brought didn't bring it with me. And also and then to make it shorter, I go to the next street in a town called Isuzugawa, and then you can find all the main street is decorated with pillars, and this is what you get on every pillar. Yes, some kind of a Magen David. So then, when you go, I promised you to tell you about a little bit about the Ark. When you go to Kyoto, they have a Gion ceremony. It's called Gion ceremony. They celebrate a festival which is called Oji Mashiach. Moshiach or Mashiach, if you want to say, if it's Jewish or Christian. And this is a celebration. You can celebrate with the Japanese. By the way, when I was there also, they were celebrating in the streets and singing and dancing and carrying these arks. You can see all along. And the measurements of this ark, the same as the measurements of Aron HaBrit. On top, you have kind of a funny bird, not the angels, of a funny bird, as you can see. You have like a imaginary bird called Ho'o. That's how it's called in Japanese, Ho'o. And the ark is called Omikoshi. And they carry the Omikoshi. They have all kinds of decoration. There are many Omikoshis. They're carrying in a festival along the streets and dancing and music. And he said, the priest told me that whenever he sees it, he remembers what is written in Sefer Shmuel about David HaMelech, how he celebrated bringing the ark into Jerusalem. And then I want to show you another clip, another surprise.
Separate from the shrine, but close by at a Buddhist temple, a group of Yamabushi perform a purification ceremony every year. Their outfits resemble that of Jewish rabbis. The boxes on their heads, the trumpets they are blowing, and the scrolls they are reading from all resemble Jewish objects. The Yamabushi have been around since mythologic time in Japan.
So what are they missing? Tefillin shel yad. They have only tefillin shel rosh. These are the Yamabushis. they're carrying tefillin. Other traditions that you have there, the dinim of nida, of how do you say in English, the period, that we're not allowed to be with the woman when in 7 days after, also 7 days after. And there's another ceremony called Arayanosa, in which you mentioned it. Is a Shinto, when he wants, a Shinto priest that he wants to purify someone, he takes a tree and or a stick with paper shreds, and he does like this. He waves it on top of the person he wants to purify, and the priest told me that one of his Christian friends saw this ceremony in Japan, and she said, this is a paganist tradition, until she came to the United States, and then saw the Arbat Aminim, people taking Arbat Aminim and doing the same thing in Sukkot. So this is a Japanese tradition. What they do is a Japanese tradition. This is what she said. So, except for tefillin, there are some other symbols. For example, you can see the sign here. Here is the more pictures that you can see the Yamabushi with their traditional ribbons and boxes that they put on over their head, and they still until this very day. I'm not talking about ancient days. These pictures are taken these days. And then you come to a place when you see all this. You see this mark is. You can find it in many houses or palaces of the emperor, of the Japanese emperor. I don't know if this, you see this mark, this is taken from the walls of Jerusalem. This symbol is from the walls of Jerusalem. And another thing is, how do we know that there were Hasidim in Japan in ancient times? When we found this statue, Mizura. We don't know if they're Ger or Vizhnitz, so we don't know what this is. And then I'll tell you, I'm approaching the end of my presentation. I just want to tell you one legend that's very popular in Japanese tradition. And it is about one of the ninja that was kind of a spy, that he arrived to the Tengu. Tengu is a man with superpowers, unnatural powers. He wanted to get some unnatural powers from him, and he gave him a scroll. It's called Torah Numaki. That's the name, Torah. This is the most important book of, like we consider, our Kabbalah, of the secret powers in the world. So they use the word Torah Naumaki until this very day to describe a way in which you can find solution to get out of crisis. So this is Torah Naumaki. But never found any other symbols. Also, another story. The myth, the Japan mythology. Every kid in Japan grows up on this story. The story is like this. The source of this story is from the 8th century. 8th century, Kojiki, Nihonshuki. There's a name of the story of these legends. So the family, the emperor's family, they're all descendants of the god named Ninigi that came down from heaven. So listen, Ninigi is the father of a tribe, Yamato, which the Japanese people descend from him. It wasn't Ninigi actually that was supposed to go down from heaven and to establish the Japanese nation. It was his older brother. But his older brother, when he was preparing himself to go down, when the older brother was preparing himself to go down, Ninigi, the younger brother, bypassed him and came down before him and took the Bechora, took the leadership. That's not the end of it. Ninigi fell in love in a pretty girl, and her name was Kohanama Sakuya. And he wanted to marry her. But her father said, no, you cannot marry her unless you marry her sister, which is not as pretty as she is. So you have to marry her. And she had to marry both. So he married both. And then he had 2 sons from her. The younger one is called Yamasaki Hiko. He was chased by his brother, by his bigger brother all the time. So he had to run away. He fled to another country. In another country, he found out that he has very strong powers, and he caused a big famine in the country, in his homeland. There was a big famine. And then his brother came to ask for forgiveness. And he forgave him for being persecuted. Then he married the daughter of the god of the sea, and they have another son by the name of Ogaya Pokayazo. He had 4 sons, 2 disappeared. The 4th one became this Emperor Kazimo that conquered the land of Yamato, and he established the nation of Japan. Any similarity to Yitzchak, Yaakov, Esav, Rachel, and Yosef and his brother, and then Menashe and Ephraim. From Menashe and Ephraim came Yoshua that conquered Eretz Israel. If you want to make any similarities, it's on your responsibility. Last, all these traditions we can really enjoy and say there is something about it, there isn't something about it. There is importance, not important, I don't know. Everybody can come out of this with his own conclusion. But there is one thing that I would like to many traditions sometimes you have that are really not serious. The Chabad Rabbi of Tokyo told me the story that in his first year he wanted to organize a Seder. But he didn't have so many Jewish, no Jewish, no Israelis. So he invited some Japanese neighbors to be in the Seder with him. And they happened to fall in love with the matzot. They like the matzot. So the next year, we want to buy matzot. So I'll get you want matzot before Pesach. So then he brought a few tons of matzot and he sold it to the Japanese. And from year to year, he has to bring more and more trucks with matzot because the Japanese want the matzot. Now, when comes the times it will come in 100 years and we find all the Japanese eat matzot. In Tokyo, they say, oh, this old tradition, they're Jewish. They eat matzot because of this. This is how it started. So this is also a kind of how tradition might begin. But these are too many signs to be incidental. And also something that goes with the heart. I don't know how many of you are really familiar with the name Senpo Tsukihara. Tsukihara was the Japanese ambassador to Lithuania during World War II. One day this Tsukihara met a Jewish boy in Lithuania that ran away from the persecution in Europe to Lithuania. And he heard the story what in all other parts of Europe the Nazi and their collaborators do to the Jews. And he asked the Japanese government for permission because he knew that if he can find a refuge for these Jews to send them to another island, they can go through Japan, he can give them visas to go to Japan, be a short while in Japan, and then with the Dutch government, they made an agreement that they can go to the Dutch island of Curacao and stay there. So they can be in Japan, he can rescue them. So he asked the Japanese government. In the beginning, he began to issue visas to the Jews that arrived in Lithuania. And then the Japanese government told him, you cannot do this. You act according, and remember the Japanese government was the collaborator of the Nazi Germany. But not when it came to the Jewish story. They didn't do any, they refused even to, in Shanghai, when all the Jews arrived in Shanghai and the Japanese took over Shanghai, they refused to the German demand to hand over the Jews to them. They didn't want. So they were against the West, but with the Germany, but not only on political grounds. Nothing to do with racism, nothing to do with Judaism. So this Tsukihara signed visas against the command that he got from the government, from his government. And then he was fired. So on his last day in office in Lithuania, he recruited all his wife and friends to write as many visas as possible. And they were taken to the train station. In the train, when he was sitting in the train, he was writing visas, stamping them, and giving through the window to the Jews, to Jewish people that came to the pier. And when the train moved, he threw out the stamp, so write your own visas. They said about 10,000 Jews were saved. The whole yeshiva of Mir was saved this way because they got the Tsukihara visas, and they ended up in Shanghai. If you come with me on a tour to China, I'll show you the building where the yeshiva Mir used to be. So this Tsukihara, now they built a museum in his memory in his hometown in Japan. And people they ask him why. He lost his job. He found a job in Russia somewhere, working for a Russian company. And then he died. He died with nothing. And then he also became Gentile righteous. And they acknowledged him. And now in Japan, in his memory, they really...
His wife died pretty recently.
Yeah, I think so. Yes. And he was asked, why did you do this? His answer was, because this was the right thing to do. But who knows if not a Jewish heart really was deep in DNA or something that really made him to acknowledge the trouble that his nation is going through. And now, getting back, and this is really the last thing, getting back to nowadays to this Japanese cousin, she's very much interested against her husband. Her husband is Japanese, he doesn't want. They made a bar mitzvah for their son in our shul in Givatayim last year. They came all the way to make the bar mitzvah because for her it was so important to keep her children being Jewish. She married a Japanese. She will not separate from me. He's the father of the children. But she wants them to be Jewish. She wants them to maintain Jewish life. She wants to build a Jewish school in Japan. So she wrote me a copy of a letter she sent a friend. She's trying to involve Bnei Akiva forefront of Jewish life in Japan. And she wants to build a new school in Japan. It's a long letter. I'm not going to read the whole thing, how she recruits the rabbis. She really is working hard to make this dream possible. So actually, someone is trying to revive Jewish life in Japan, and I wish her luck. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Yeah, if there are any questions. Well, yes.
I'm a Holocaust.
Pardon?
I'm a Holocaust
Survivor, yes.
And I wonder why they want so much the Jewish religion, and they think that